Welcome to Cancer Talks, a podcast sharing stories of personal transformation and collective healing from people who have been touched by cancer. My name is Claire, and I'll be guiding today's conversation. If you're listening on an iPhone, click the plus sign in the upper right corner to follow our show and get notified when a new episode is released. My guest today is Lisa Nelson. Lisa was born in Jamaica and raised in Queens, New York. She's worked for many years as an oncology social worker and is also an end-of-life doula. Lisa has a podcast of her own called Diary of a Black Social Worker, where she shares diverse narratives of social work practice, personal triumphs, challenges, education, and reflections about the day-to-day of an oncology social worker of color. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, Claire.
Welcome to Cancer Talks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So we often like to start getting a little picture of your early life. I know you experienced some big losses early on that really informed your career, but maybe even before getting into all that, could you just paint us a little picture of where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, so I am Jamaican. I grew up in Jamaica, West Indies. I was born in the rural, one of the parishes. Jamaica has 14 parishes, and I grew up in St. Mary and also in Kingston. And it was a really nice childhood. You know, we think of rural in America as farm life, and it was the same in Jamaica, farm life, not void of rural issues as far as, you know, some of it includes poverty. Jamaica is a third world country. And so I grew up in that setting, you know, waking up every morning, carrying water, feeding the animals. When I lived in the country part, you know, walking to go to school, not having a lot of resources, including food, but you know, our family was, you know, we were able to get by, and my parents and my grandparents, we all lived in an extended, you know, multi-generational family with grandparents and parents, cousins, pretty large because my grandmother had 10 children. And so we had multiple, you know, I had multiple cousins. And so that was the earlier part growing up in Jamaica. And we migrated here, my brother, my sister, and I. We migrated here after being separated from my mother for 3 years in Jamaica, which happens a lot in Caribbean families. You know, your parents come over before you and before their children, and then they're able to get the proper visa and the proper documentation to solidify you coming here to reunite with your parents or family members. And so I came here at age 11 to New York after living with my aunt on my father's side in Jamaica and Kingston. And so I came here at 11 in Queens, New York, and, you know, reunited with my mom, my grandparents. And we gradually, our family members, different aunts and cousins, eventually were able to get the appropriate visas, and we were able to come over. And so it was a good experience living in Queens. You know, I think looking back and as I'm thinking about it, even, you know, everything is new. You're in America, right? And you're 11, you know, I was 11 at the time. And, you know, it had a lot of challenges too, getting familiar with new culture, assimilating. You know, it was a different time then, but we were still faced with, you know, the challenges of being an immigrant coming to the country and not learning how to navigate that, you know, dealing with anti-immigration sentiments, anti-immigrant sentiments. And even as a young Black person, like actually hearing the N-word, being called the N-word, you're like, what? Because I've never heard this before.
Wow.
So all of those things were included in the American, you know, getting the American dream and getting familiar with the American lifestyle.
Yeah. Is your memory very vivid from when you were 11? Do you have some, arrival?
Yeah. I remember the first time getting on a plane. I came in night. I came in September 1986, and that was the first time getting on a plane. You know, I came with my siblings. I can't remember coming to the house because my family, they all saved and they bought a house. And so it was a 3-story house and we all lived on different floors.
Yeah.
I can't remember my day to day, like not day to day, but I can't remember that night, but I remember in general just like just a bunch of memories of holidays and just being with my little cousins, all of us getting chicken pox together, the
Oh
whole
my
house
God.
having chicken pox, which was crazy. We all stay at
Oh,
a school.
awful.
I think of even now having children of my own and them not having the ability to live with their grandmother and their grandfather and their mother and their
Mm-hmm.
aunt, their siblings. And I'm sure it was a lot of drama too, now looking back, siblings and uncles living together. And for one moment or a time, it was probably like 18 of us in the house on different
Wow.
floors. Yeah. And that was
Yeah.
amazing. And you cooked and you ate from one pot, and maybe on the second floor, my aunt would make something else, and then my grandmother would make something. So there were really good times. We didn't have a lot financially, but everyone worked and we suffered different things in our lives. But it was still really nice to live together. And it's nice thinking about that now, like as we transitioned into all moving into different spaces of our lives right now,
Mm-hmm.
being an adult and being in my 40s. I miss that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I miss it a lot. And we talk about it and reminisce a lot when our family was a family,
Mm.
like a really close family. So it was a
Yeah.
very nice, it was a trying time, but it was a nice time just
Mm.
being surrounded by people that you love and feeling safe.
I want to ask you what your earliest memory of cancer is.
Trying to think, my earliest thought of cancer was I didn't know, quite honestly, I didn't know a lot of people with cancer. The
Right.
only time I recall hearing the word cancer, and it was like a whisper, was like we lived in Long Island after I was 18 and my mom was able to save and to purchase a home. We moved from Queens and we lived in Long Island at that time. And I remember even reading the newspapers, hearing about Long Island having a lot of cancer, and they were wondering what was in the
Mm.
environment and different
Mm-hmm.
things that they were talking about. But it was more of a whisper, honestly, growing up within my home, within our family, and even outside. I didn't recall hearing anyone. It's more prevalent now, obviously, but I never heard of anyone having cancer. No, I have to take that back. It's after, like during my adult life, like 18, that my mother informed us that her father died from cancer, that he had leukemia.
Mm.
And it's funny that you asked me that because I didn't think,
Mm.
yeah, that was the only time that I recall. And I was probably about 18, because again, we didn't really talk about like family health conditions.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
but I remember mommy telling me when I started going to the doctor when I was in high school and I graduated and I was getting ready to like complete forms and to go to the doctor on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at the form, it says
Right.
family history. Yes, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall her telling me, I said, oh, what a grandpa. I mean, my grandmother had remarried because my mother's father
Uh,
had died. And so I asked her, like, oh, what did he die from? And she said he had leukemia.
and you never met him?
No, no, I
Mm-hmm.
never met my mother's and some of her siblings. Her father, no, he died. I think when my mother was 14.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
And fast forwarding, you're an oncology social worker. Are there more recent personal cancer stories or experiences that led you to that work, or it was more of a career decision?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. We ended up moving to Atlanta, and I worked for Emory University, and I was working in their transplant center, which was primarily for nephrology for patients that had renal failure. They were on dialysis, and they were being evaluated for getting a transplant, whether it was a living donor, if a family member would donate a kidney to them, or if it was a deceased donor, if they would wait on a transplant list. And so I was working in that area with patients with chronic illnesses, chronic, being having to be on dialysis for years. And as I was on that team, I started noticing that while the patients, many of whom were minority patients, coming from Alabama, rural parts of Georgia, Mississippi, some of them were coming up to go to Grand Emory, right? The big institute to get care from
Yeah.
out of their small towns. And so I started, while I was on the nephrology team, I started noticing some of the patients while they were being evaluated for transplantation, they found out during the different tests. You have to go through a host of tests, even a psychological test. And so they found out some of them that they had cancer while they were
Oh.
waiting, yeah, on the list. And so a lot of times I found myself supporting those patients. Here they were with a cancer a renal failure. They live sometimes, oftentimes in poverty and food deserts, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
systemic challenges living in the deep South. And then here I was at Emory, not only supporting them and trying to get them on the transplant list, but now hearing that, they had a cancer diagnosis. And so that's what kind of changed the trajectory of my career, because that job was a part of a research study to help minority patients get waitlisted faster by having myself as a social worker to help them to get some things done and to help to navigate that and to get their transplant
Yeah.
done. And so once that study was over after 3 years, opportunities opened itself up for oncology. And I took that route because I kind of inadvertently had experience supporting those cancer patients.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your day to day like of an oncology social worker? I feel like when I found your page on Instagram and you have some really helpful videos there, and it's like such an obvious thing, but we haven't interviewed anyone before in that position, and I think also not everybody knows about or knows to seek out that kind of social support or emotional support during their
Mm-hmm.
treatment.
Yeah, so I work at it's a cancer institute in Long Island, and I see patients. I not only I support 7 oncologists. I bring myself a full-time social worker and another part-time social worker, and so we support 7 oncologists, and we see patients across the continuum from when they're first diagnosed. And it could mean, they, like, say, for instance, some of our patients, they have stomach pain, or sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they fall, they hurt themselves, they go to the hospital, and they may find out in the hospital that, this pain after some test, they're saying, I'm sorry, but you have colon cancer, lymphoma. It could be anything, right? So they find it out in the hospital and they come here, they follow up with our oncologists that they're assigned to, whether it's a solid tumor, prostate, pancreatic, colon, breast cancer, head and neck cancer, all kinds of different cancers. And it could be blood cancers, a lymphoma, leukemia, melanoma, it could be anything. And so that's where we come in, right? Just measuring their, a day to day would include me seeing a new patient, a newly diagnosed patient. If they come with support, whether it's wife or children or a spouse, a partner, just, completing an assessment, meeting them where they are. Most of our patients are usually in shock when they come in.
Mm-hmm.
So, like today, I met a patient who recently got diagnosed. He came in with his wife, supporting him, just checking in with him, asking him about what his life was before this cancer
Mm-hmm.
shocked and changed his whole life in a couple of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Rounding. We start our day with rounding, talking, today we had about 51 patients in the clinic, and they're coming for an array of different services. It could be for chemotherapy or hydration or blood products or IV infusions. So just seeing them in addition to our new patients, making referrals. Today I made referrals to hospice because 2 of our patients are not doing well. And they weren't here in the clinic, but we're seeing patients across the continuum from diagnosis to end of life. So, I made 2 referrals to a hospice agency. I am facilitating a wig boutique tomorrow for
Wow.
patients, yeah, who have lost their hair from treatment. And so they're coming in as the first. We just implemented this here with collaborating with an organization to have them come in to kind of give the women just the opportunity to fit their wigs, have some snacks, just chat and meet each other. and, to offer them a free wig, because sometimes patients are not able to pay for a wig. They want to, sometimes a free wig may not match their hair. It's not culturally diverse. I have locks myself, so I know if, God forbid, if I had a cancer diagnosis, I'd want something to maintain who I looked like before and how I felt, and the hair that matched, who I looked like prior to a cancer diagnosis. So, just being there for them in that capacity. So that would be nice. Follow-up calls with our patients and family members, checking in with patients that I've seen already, but just wanting to know on a day, while they're here for treatment, how are they doing? How are they adjusting? I had a patient here who's her husband's a physician, and, just checking in with him privately, just like, how are things going? Having those conversations, intimacy, mortality, offering support groups if needed. As I said, hospice if needed. Sometimes our patients need DME equipment, right? They may need a hospital, durable medical equipment. They may be saying, you know what? I honestly can't, my legs are so tired. I'm having difficulty walking. I'm having difficulty sleeping. So making referrals to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, providing short-term counseling, in the privacy of my office, making referrals outside, if they need someone to come into the home to provide counseling, just an array of just kind of triaging throughout the day.
Range. That's amazing.
Just just triaging throughout the day, just starting from 8 o'clock and just going straight through based on those needs. And sometimes patients come in, they may be having a crisis, they may be upset about, being there, just needing that calming person to allow them to explore the sadness and the anger, the fear, the loss of their lives, right? That they thought they were, whether you thought you were going to be a mother, and now you've been told that, not only are you losing your uterus or your ovaries and that you're not able to have children, having that conversation, even sometimes before, they even get here, we're consulted to meet with them when they have those conversations with their oncologist. And also concrete needs. We're seeing a lot more of patients with food insecurity. I have a patient who's homeless, who's living in a car with her son, So we're seeing quite a few of that, giving patients, through various grants, giving them gift cards to the store to buy food, supporting the staff. We have staff that are not only touched by cancer and other challenges. Some of our staff has family members, their spouses. I have a staff member here whose spouse was a patient here and just recently died this week. So supporting, that staff member, following up cards, sympathy calls, like it's just really being there and supporting the patients and their family members with what needs they may have, and their children. They have patients with small children, giving them resources to various community organizations to help with, bereavement or groups for children. We try to find as many resources in the community as possible to support and give to our patients. So we're always looking for what's out there.
I hear such creativity in the way that you approach this role. And well, I want to read the job description, what this was when you signed up for it, because I hear all the ways that you go above and beyond are just like, I hear all of these different avenues of support that you came up with by being in relation to everyone you're working with and listening for what the needs of the community are. And I also hear just the many different roles that you occupy in the course of even one day, of like moving from being therapist to like resource coordinator to almost like family member and the strategy. And
it's like, even naming it, even saying those things, it's like, oh my gosh, like the amount of things that I just did in one day. And it can be overwhelming at times. It could be quite overwhelming and challenging.
Do you have a lot of, like, in your role, you're the main social worker at this spot, right? So you have a lot of autonomy, and the program is kind of how you've shaped it to be.
Right. I think one of the things here that I really like about where I work is that they do allow that autonomy. I think I've been in this role within this organization for 5 years, and I think that's one of the benefits of being here, being able to say, you know what, I think it would be great if we did a wig boutique. Sure, go ahead. Or I think it would be great if we did, I see that the staff is struggling with the losses. Why don't we do
Mm,
a remembrance wreath, remembering each patient? Because as I said, some of our
mm-hmm.
nurses and staff members have been here for longer than I have, and we're human beings. We see our patients and hear about their lives, when their children have babies, when their mother passes, when
Mm-hmm.
somebody gets a divorce, when, their husband stopped having sex with them. We hear so many stories. We have so many stories, or,
Yeah,
and so, it's like going to the hair salon. You're just kind of like telling someone they see you, whether it's monthly or weekly or whatever.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, and most of our patients we see like on a weekly basis, monthly basis. So they kind of update us and let us know. And so it's just such a privilege to be able to support them in those ways. But I think you have to be, as a social worker and as a seasoned social worker, and I'm always learning and growing and learning of more support, the support systems that are out there and organizations that are out there. It really, I can see the difference, but I love the fact that they give me and us that autonomy to support our patients in the many ways that we do. I really get pushback about the programs, whether it's for our staff, whether it's for
Mm,
our patients, their children, their husband, like their spouses, their partners. It really, I really enjoy that piece, and that support from the staff here.
that's amazing. Before we move too far past it, I just wanted to echo that you said one of the first things you often do is when you see a new patient is ask them, get to know them a little bit, like outside of, before, beyond
Mhm.
their diagnosis. And I just
Mhm.
love that you led with that, because that's really one of the main tenets of the podcast is when people do come on who've received diagnoses, it's all about sharing the story that's bigger than their cancer, and that's really who
Of
they are.
course. I think cancer just, it just, I feel like it's like what, like you could be on the beach. Like I remember being on the beach like a couple of years ago, like when I first got married, and we were at the beach, and the wave just came up and just like knocked me down. Like one minute I'm like, hey, I'm on the beach, just kind of hanging.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a big wave just hit me in the face, and like my wedding band fell off.
Oh my
And I,
God.
in the middle of the ocean, we were in Dominican Republic, and my top fell off and my breasts were out. Like it was just like, what the heck happened here? And my husband was trying, a new husband was trying to pull my top up. So, and cancer does that. Well, the water is in my mouth, I'm wet, I had to take time to like catch myself. What the heck
What's
happened? Dave
going
was trying to
on?
quickly
Yeah.
catch the ring. Like it's like cancer does that. Like, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
an understatement. It knocks you off your feet. It leaves you naked. It leaves you trying to catch your breath,
Yeah.
trying to compose yourself. What the hell happened? What is this? Like a minute
Mm-hmm.
ago, I was standing on my feet, I was steady, and now I'm like on my back, like
Mm-hmm.
shirtless, you know, um, breathless, out of breath, just, naked on somebody's table. Like it's just so many,
Mm-hmm.
um, it affects you in so many ways. And so I do try to find when a patient comes in, they've been anxious the night before, they're overwhelmed. Here I was, a successful this person, whether you're a
Mm-hmm.
janitor, whether you were a housekeeper, whether you were a physician yourself treating cancer patients, because
Mm-hmm.
we have that too. Physicians who are like, Lisa, do I really have cancer? Like, are you, and it's like,
Yeah.
yes, you do, and so I start with who they are, who they were, because it consumes your time. You think of, even if you were a young person, you just got married and you had your whole
Mm-hmm.
life ahead of you, right? For better or for worse, you're going to see it through. And then a month later, you find out that you have a tumor growing in your back. What? What are you saying?
Yeah.
If you're a retired person and you've worked for 50 years or 40 years or 30 years, and you're looking, we're in New York, we're looking forward to our pensions and living the dream. And going to Florida and living in Boca, and or for me, living on a farm, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, right before you retire, you go for a checkup and then you have a cancer diagnosis. How is this possible? And so I want to hear about those stories. I want you to share your narrative about what your life was like because it can consume you and make you feel, and you lose yourself, your family losing itself. So I always preface with that. And I enjoy instead, I think, every social worker, every therapist, they have their way of going in to speak with the patient. And I always preface and introduce myself and then say, tell me a little bit about you before all of this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the fact that it just switches up everything. Their demeanor changes, whether they just got diagnosed a week ago or 3 months ago, they start smiling. Yeah, I was working at such and such, or yeah, I just came back from Rome. I was with my kids and so it
Yeah.
takes away, like they have their stories. And so I enjoy hearing those stories and to hear how did we get here.
Mm-hmm. And it's like asking someone to remember who they are because in that
Mhm.
moment they might have forgotten.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious how you feel like your relationship or way of looking at cancer or chronic illness more broadly has changed over the course of your different careers in death doula work and social work.
I think before, I think back, you asked when I first started, you talked about my childhood. I think my family had a lot of losses growing up, Jamaica and here, coming to the States. Even though it wasn't from cancer, it was, they were traumatic things. And I think that, due to genetic things and, certain, because of some cultural things, sometimes people are more susceptible to, whether it's diabetes or hypertension and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So you have, family members who are faced with that, even if it wasn't cancer. So I think that having that experience and knowing people in my community when I was growing up, it opened up my eyes to people managing with chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always, I think for myself, one of the things that I always prided myself on was like wanting to hear those patient stories or to hear more about how they were coping. And so that transcended and went into my role as a social worker in regards to like, and I think I just kind of shifted that over that care and that,
Yeah.
uh, I don't know, I don't want to call it excitement because I'm not excited by a person having cancer, but that excitement of
Curiosity.
the curiosity. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you for that. The curiosity of meeting new people and hearing those patient stories went from that, from chronic illnesses to cancer. And I try to treat each patient individually, starting where they are, just I try to I give everyone the same standard of care as far as the care that I'm giving, the support that I'm giving. But as I enjoy the work and it's over the years, we talk about cultural humility and learning and growing and starting where the patients are, being there for their families. I've had to learn that over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have definitions for them, right?
Right.
But it's always trying to learn and to figure out how much more can I do to support people in this capacity, because as I said, it's trying and it takes a lot out of me. And so over the years I've had to learn how to step back a little bit, how to self-care, how to accept them things that I can't change.
Mm-hmm.
My younger self would I have been much calmer when somebody's like, they come into the clinic and they're screaming, they're upset, they're crying, or it's they're lashing out. My
Yeah.
younger self probably would be like, what the heck is what is. And I think as human beings, sometimes when people come in and they're coming from a place of anger, we don't really, we get defensive and we're like, well, then whatever, you don't want to get treated, oh well. And it can't be like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, you can go in and you could say, tell me, Mr. Jones, what's going on right now? I think I've learned over the years that sometimes that anger is not even directed, it's not directed at me.
Right.
It's over the entire situation. So I've learned, and I'm still learning as I go along.
It's just so interesting that you mentioned anger, because I haven't asked anyone who's a caretaker. The question has never come to me, but it was formulating right before you said that. Like, do people ever get angry at you, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, patients are like, and it's normal. And sometimes they're trying not to say that they're angry. I get angry sometimes. Sometimes, I mean, I had a young patient who was probably 42, young Jamaican guy with a family, a go-getter, like just such a nice guy. And I was very angry. Like I was like, God, what is this? Like what is this? How is a 42-year-old man who is at the prime of his life with his children? He's working hard. He is having chemo and working at a juice shop in the evenings and cooking and enjoying his life in spite of a cancer diagnosis. You know, why is he in this pain? Why is he? And I was angry. I was angry for him. And so it's normal to feel angry and frustrated, but it's what do we do with those feelings after? You know, do we sit in that anger and that bitterness? And so it's important to me, like, to acknowledge that and to validate when our patients come in, even if they're from, we have patients from religious backgrounds. And, based on what we believe, it's oftentimes like our patients feel fear, or they feel like it's blasphemous to say, God, why? Whoever they look at as their creator, like, why? How does this happen? And it's okay. It's okay to say, I'm really frustrated. I'm very fearful. I'm scared of dying. No matter what, we have patients who live to be 100 years old, and it's innate. We want to live forever. We can't. We have patients who are 99 or 98, and they're coming in and they're like, I want to come in and get hydrated. I want to get this because it's innate. We want to live. And it's like taboo to say or to question and to say, I'm upset. I'm really disappointed. I worked all these years. I have a family. I just got married. Why the F am I getting? What are you telling me? I have 3 months to live. And so it's okay for patients to feel safe to say that, no matter what their walk of life is. And sometimes it's like, I say, tell me what you're feeling right now. And they're like, I'm sad, I'm this, I'm that. And I said, are you a little bit angry too? And then the tears just start coming because to even say that they're angry. And it's okay. It's okay to be angry because that's a normal reaction to a cancer diagnosis. And that's one of the emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have rituals or practices that you use to help you kind of hold and move through the weight of everyone you're working with?
I think I pray a lot, right? Like everybody, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of people that are calling in, and faith is really important. We're all in, we're in different spaces in our lives, and there's so many different beliefs. But I pray a lot. Sometimes during, I pray before I come in. I read like affirmations, just asking for guidance and strength throughout the day. And sometimes even when I'm sitting there speaking to a patient, or if a doctor consults and say, Lisa, I need you to come in to speak with someone, they have, like, for instance, I had a doctor that I worked with in the South. And I remember it was my first time. It was a young woman. And he said, unfortunately, he told me this before we went in the room. He said, unfortunately, there's nothing more that we're going to be able to do. She really needs to get her things in order. I'm going in to tell her. And I thought, what? But, and at that exact moment in my mind, I was like, oh, shoot. I just said, Lord, please give me the right words to say. Because I didn't know what I was going to say to this woman. She was younger than me. At that time, I probably was like 40 and she was like 37. She had a child, a 10-year-old child whose father had died a couple of years prior. And she was his only support. And when the doctor told her, it was like, and Lisa, and he kind of gestured towards me, and I was like, I can't even remember what I said to her. And so all I could say is in my mind as I'm speaking to her, and, tell me a little bit, what does this look like? What does quality of life look like for you right now? How can I support you? I was just like, Lord, please give me the right words. So I do just prayer and just asking for guidance and asking for the right words to say. now that I'm thinking about it, even before we started, we breathed. And I do a lot of that. Sometimes just breathing, just getting some of that out, pushing some of that out. Taking lunch breaks. I think I'm selfish. Even if it's 10, 15, 30
Right.
minutes, you have to take time, whether it's like today, it's like 90 something degrees today. And I still went outside. Like I sat under a tree and just ate, like just sat there just for 2 minutes with the hot air blowing in my face, but I think I need that time to separate from the space that I'm in because I need to have that time to myself and just to kind of recompose, realign myself, and then come back in. And I think another thing is, it sounds silly because people are always like, what? You work all day and you go home and cook every day? And I'm like, yes, I enjoy cooking every
Me
day
too. Yeah.
because it helps me, the chopping of the vegetables, like it's just like a whole routine. And it just like, I could have had a very bad day or a very trying day and a sad day, a happy day. But when I go home, that's like my safe space. I wipe the counters down. I light a candle, and then I just start cooking, and it helps me to kind of, just to debrief for the day.
Who are you
Taking a
cooking for?
walk. I cook, I'm cooking. I cook for my husband, and we have two kids. We have an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. So, I enjoy like, yeah, what do you guys want? Or we use this in the house, like, cooking different meals for them. It really, it makes me feel like I'm doing something, to pour into, food is very important to me anyway, but like just to pour into them and to do something, seeing them take that in and take that love that I put into cooking. So I really do enjoy that piece. And so, taking a walk, just sitting outside sometimes, just like seeing, like hearing the birds, when the sun sets. Sometimes I just I go home and make a little dinner and then I just sit outside and just like breathe and just hear the birds. You hear the birds calling, the mama and papa birds calling each other in, for the night when dusk. So I enjoy nature and just being in nature. That really helps me because of the simple things. Some of our patients can't even breathe, they're on oxygen, so I think about just those simple things to taste. We take it for granted, just the ability to taste. Our patients here can't even, today it was like, I used to enjoy this. I can't taste this anymore. It's the metallic taste. I hate, so just even, of course, sometimes if we're eating certain foods, we want to just shove it in our mouths and quickly eat it. But it's nice to just be able to just taste and to feel and just like, just listen to our bodies. So those are some things on a day to day that in spite of the busyness of the clinic of life, just kind of stepping back and enjoying those moments. The simple things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hear how present you're able to be. Or sometimes cooking can like be a chore, or like the lunch break is like, oh, I gotta get to the next place. But I hear you really letting yourself slow down in those moments, which makes such a difference.
Yeah. Even if it's just 20 minutes, just sit and just like breathe and then get back in there. Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit about your death doula practice? I know you haven't been having that much time for it.
Yeah. No, so I'm a trained end of life doula, and I, help people or patients or clients to choose how they want to live their lives, right? So it could be just providing support, advocating for them with their family members. I think just like in the oncology setting, sometimes our family members, don't want to hear, it's difficult for them. I can say not that they don't want to hear it. Sometimes that happens too. But I think a lot of times they have a challenging time listening to our needs and what we did, listen to the patient need and wanting them to follow through on that. So I'm there just to advocate for our patients, helping them to guide them through the end of life process. I work with primarily, obviously, terminally ill patients. Do they want to, sitting and meeting with the patient, their family members, and saying, let's talk about what does the time that you have remaining, what do you want it to look like? It could be them wanting to do, a project, wanting to do a living memorial. If you know that you have a cancer diagnosis and you're saying, Lisa, let's plan something. Let's try to get, my family together to celebrate me, to celebrate my life before I'm gone. It could be something as even having difficult conversations with their family members, writing a letter, just wanting them to be comfortable, and even after helping their family members to plan their funeral, their memorial, providing companionship, sitting by the bedside. I think it's sometimes a lot of our family members, as patients as they're passing, just giving the family respite. If it's, I worked with the husband before who, his spouse really relied on him for everything. And so it was challenging just sitting there by the bedside with her all the time. He was like, I haven't bathed in like 2 days. I'm sitting here for hours with her.
Wow.
And he had limited family support. So just sitting there for even an hour or two with a family member, I picked some lavender from the garden. I sat with her and spoke to her just to give her husband some respite, just being there physically, but also providing emotional support for the person who is terminally ill. Um, you know, Coordinating care with the care team, just being there by bedside, speaking to the care team, just working with the patient in whatever capacity they need me to be. We don't give as a end of life doula, we're not going to give medical advice. And it just so happened that this role kind of overlaps with it a little bit because of the patient population that I work with. And so some of that skill set kind of overlaps, which is quite nice too. But unfortunately, because of the busyness of the clinic and other family things, I haven't really been seeing a lot of patients this year. I know, like after COVID or during COVID, it was, I saw quite a few people, and just being there for their family members during that time. But it's been, I've kind of had to step back too. And as you said, you talked about self-care and grounding myself. It's like I really had to kind of choose one or the other. And I hope that I'll be able to get back into more of that as the summer starts to wind down with other family responsibilities and such. But it's a wonderful role. And as I said, it's a privilege being with someone. I think that, death, I think in our culture is looked at as a bad thing and everybody wants to live forever. But just like we prepare and plan for our children, for a child or to be born, and we make such a big deal out of it, I think that our deaths can also be an opportunity for us to make the best out of it, because I always tell our patients, I have to travel that road too. And so I want them to be comfortable with that. And there's a whole movement around that and wanting for us to, I think the big term is nowadays normalize. We have to normalize this and we have to normalize that. And so we want to normalize that death it's going to happen. It's imminent. It's what do they say? You can guarantee the only thing you can guarantee is taxes or death. Like, yeah. So it's like, and I'm learning and growing in that role as well as an end of life doula.
I think a lot of the things you just described, sometimes people who are caring for those who are dying expect hospice to fill some of the roles you just described. And I've been reading a lot about that and wondering if you could just sort of outline like what the hospice role is in contrast to the doula role and how they work together.
I think with hospice, they come in, it's usually made through a hospice agency. They come in, they provide a social worker. They have, if you need an aide to come in, it's through your insurance. They have an aide that come in to give the family respite, a caregiver. And they provide a couple of hours a day based on the insurance that you have, if you have long-term insurance and things like that. Medication management, making sure that the person is comfortable, for symptom control if the patient is in severe pain. And even they do a lot of training with their family members to make sure that that they know how to help with the patient while the hospice nurse is away. And they do have social workers there that help with the support, with bereavement and some of the roles do overlap, because I think in my role, each end of life doula offers different things. But I think in my role, doulas often step in, and myself, in those spaces where it's unsupported, whether they are having like family issues. And well, first, let me say this. They would have to pay privately for an end of life doula. They pay privately. And I know that a lot of us do it based on like a sliding scale based on the needs of the families. So they can do like hourly rates or based on visits and things like that. And I think that we provide the time, like, a social worker may say, you know what, I have 20 minutes or 30 minutes to come in. I think in my role as a doula, it's to really tailor those services to each person. So the social worker might have 20 minutes. And so I can come in and just sit and just talk with the patient for an hour or so, because that's what they need at that time. Do you need me to come in twice a month, once a month, twice a week? It's really based on the needs of the client who's requesting that. And there's no typical route. Like I would say, oh, I come in, I do this and do that. It really varies based on those needs. Giving that emotional support, as I said, maybe a social worker through an agency may not be able to provide, to light candles and to sit with lavender and talk about, and write down the things that you want to tell your daughter, or to write letters, or to play a game with you, or just sit and have a cup of tea and talk about your, quality of life and what you want out of your memorial. Like a social worker from an agency might not be able to do that. But I think that that's what we're here to do, to fill those spaces where the family need practical or emotional support. I remember one time having to sit with a family who, this husband, it was a second marriage, and it was quite difficult for him to get through to the children, the adult children of his wife, and to tell them what his wife needed. And the social worker didn't, we sat as a team, but I was able to coordinate that and say, this is what this husband wants, this is what this patient wants. And it was a big blowout at first. However, we were able to get on the same page, with myself advocating with the social worker from the agency, from the hospice agency, with the nurse, with the physician, and saying, this is what this patient wants. And then even after the call, working with the family and processing, how can we make mom comfortable? Yes, the hospice agency will provide comfort in the sense of like medication. She had tumors and different things, but emotional comfort, knowing that myself as a doula was there to support her with advocating for herself and saying, this is what I want, and this is what I want my family to support me in, Yeah, I hope that made sense.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
You have a title for your doula practice, which is Solace in Knowing. Can you say a little bit about what that means to you?
Right. I think, solace sometimes, having seen so many patients, sometimes I'll say, like, I used to say, like, oh, I hope you find solace in knowing that your dad is comfortable, or that your dad is at peace, or your mom is at peace, or whoever. And I think that solace is that comfort. So it's just like solace in knowing that I'm here for you, solace in knowing that I'm going to advocate for you. Just knowing that you have an advocate, that you have, support. And so that's what that means to me. Just make, the person knowing that I'm there to support them in whatever capacity that they need me to be.
Is there anything else on your mind that you want to share?
I was going to say that it's the role can be, as an oncology social worker, as an end-of-life doula, it could be quite overwhelming at times. And I think it's important to, as you said, find spaces, find things that you enjoy, whether it's little things, or, if you can go to Africa and get on a plane, or go to the Amazon and do all those nice, those amazing things, great. And and it may not happen very quickly for some of us, but I think that there are definitely ways, like I always tell my patients, that even if we're not able to do those big trips and those big things, that the simple things, being around family, being with with friends. I have a patient today she has a big family, and they have a meal, like a communal meal with neighbors every single day while she's been going through her cancer treatment.
Wow.
Yeah, and I find it so amazing that, those are the simple things. I think we lose a lot in today's society. And unfortunately, sometimes a cancer diagnosis slows us down, and have us reflect and look at things that we found so minuscule or so insignificant. And for myself, I don't know my future. I don't know what will happen, but I try to find value in those moments before, God forbid, it gets to that. You know what I mean? So I want to make sure, I think for myself, I can compare myself, and we all do it. We compare ourselves to other people. We want to live a certain way. We want to live a certain way. We want certain things done a certain way. And we just get caught up in that rat race. And so as I've gotten older and I'm learning about myself and the interactions that I'm having with patients and people and even you, right? Like those interactions are always an opportunity to learn and to not only learn more about people, but to also learn about myself. And it's really about just like slowing down and just resting in whatever my path will be, right? So it's just like connecting with myself, connecting with others, and just trusting the process, right? Just trusting the process.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. Cancer Talks is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. Write to us at info@cancertalks.com if you have a story to share. If you're moved to donate, please visit cancertalks.com/donate.